The Mercedes-Benz Interview Lounge.
They say you should never meet your idols.
That
Like
is
Barry
true.
Manilow, it was the most disappointing day of my life.
That's right.
Samin Nosrat is the host of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, and she's here. Oh, there she is.
May I hug you? Oh my God, I'm so happy to meet you.
That was such a good idea.
Sit down, Samin. What are you
How's
eating?
it going?
You already,
Oh,
she
this
walks
is
in.
the
She walks in while eating. What,
Yeah, you've got. What is that?
you can headphones if you want.
All
or
right.
headphones if you. There's your
Hello.
mom.
You guys are so fun. Okay, so
What is that? Is your volume good? There's a knob down there.
I
but
feel good.
I'm not going to put
Do
my
you feel
hand down.
good? You no, don't put your hand down.
What is it you're eating? Because that looks so good.
It's called kataifa or kanefa, and so the story behind it's pretty funny. Where on this trip I've been shepherded, whisked everywhere, so they've sent a car, car service. And
Right.
so 2 days ago I had this amazing driver from Egypt, and we totally clicked. So I think he requested me again, and in between yesterday it was his daughter's birthday party.
Right.
So this is the traditional Egyptian birthday cake. So
So
he
he
brought
brought
me a slice.
That's so awesome.
Well,
That's so cool.
well, it is cool, but it's like we don't have any.
Here,
No.
bud. Here. No, just tear some
May
off.
I?
It's really
I'm
good.
gonna use your fork.
It has this
Because
like
I want your germs.
It's perfect.
Okay, so I smell some coconut. What do I smell?
It's like it's got cream inside, and it has this like noodly thing. They're basically like vermicelli noodles.
Is
my
that
God.
good?
It's really good. We should pass it around.
Pass
You
it
guys can just
around.
tear off a piece.
Pass it around.
Yeah, and I think it
Oh
has
my God.
rose water in it and
Nice. It has
pistachios
rose
and
water.
almonds.
Oh my
We're
gosh.
passing it around like a bomb.
So, but now wait, what if this guy was trying to poison us?
No.
You have
He's
to
so lovely.
Eat the cake part.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
That is crazy. So, I mean, first of all, we sat down. My fiance Alex and I sat down. He and I said, let's just watch this fat acid heat. He said, no, it's salt, fat, acid, heat. I said, well, I don't know. We'll start with acid. We'll go to heat. I don't know. So we didn't know what to expect. We started watching, and it was the best TV we've experienced in a long time, other than Ozark, which is fabulous.
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
He came in the next morning and he's like, "You have to see this show.
Oh.
It's 4 episodes. It's so good. She's amazing." He talks so much about it.
Tell us about you. So you're Iranian descent.
Yeah, my family's from Iran. I
And-
was born in San Diego.
Okay, which is such an Iranian enclave.
Yeah, lots of Iranians in Southern California for
So-
sure.
so-
I know you're making a joke, but it's true.
It's true. So how did your family end up in the States?
My parents are of 2 different religions, and my dad's religion, which is called Baha'i, was being persecuted, as they sensed the Islamic Revolution coming.
Right.
So my entire dad's family, like the whole extended family, left Iran and went to all over the world. And so my grandparents came to San Diego. So my dad followed his parents and brought my mom. And then
And my
Oh, wow.
yeah.
my grandparents lived in San Diego too.
Oh, really?
They all the way from Texas.
Oh.
Not quite as interesting. But so where did you get this fascination for food? It's deeper than just sitting down and eating.
Yeah, well, I have always loved to eat, which I think is really, really important. And so, especially if you want to have a career in the food world, and I say that because there are some cooks I know who don't love to eat. I think they view it as like a sciencey, eating is so sensual and it's such an important part of being a human. So I think if you're going to pursue a life in this, or even just want to be a person who enjoys your daily eating, commit to it.
Right.
So I moved to Northern California to go to college. And when I moved to Berkeley, people said, oh, there's this famous restaurant here. But I grew up eating like delicious home-cooked Persian food.
Like what?
So-
What would be a home-cooked Persian meal?
Well, we make it actually in the show. My
With your mom?
Yeah. My mom is the best character in the whole show. We make the traditional Persian crispy rice, which is called tadig. So you kind of fry the rice at the bottom of the pot and it gets crispy, and you unmold the whole thing like a cake. So I grew up basically eating that every day with different stews and vegetables and all that kind of stuff, which was so delicious. So I was no stranger to good food, but my sophomore year of college, I fell in love, and my boyfriend and I spent all of our time eating, and he wanted to show me, his favorite pizza and ice cream and all of the things from his childhood.
Yes.
And he had always wanted to eat at this restaurant, Chez Panisse in Berkeley. So we saved up $220 over the course of 7 months. We had a shoebox where we put our extra laundry quarters or whatever.
Right.
And we went to eat there, and it was so enchanting and
What was
inspiring.
that night like for you?
Oh, well,
Do you remember what you ate?
Absolutely.
And do you remember what you thought
remember everything.
and how it made you feel?
Yes,
Okay, give us an example.
So I was wearing denim skirt and a black tank top. And I was 19 years old in this very fancy, what felt to me to be extraordinarily fancy restaurant. And we came in, and the restaurant has a fixed menu. And so you don't get to choose. They just bring you, it's kind of like going to somebody's house. So the first course was a salad with frisee, which is that kind of like crazy lettuce, you know? And it had like little bits of bacon and a poached egg and mushrooms on top. And that was, to me, I'd never had a poached egg before. And the second course was halibut poached in broth. And I was like, this is very exotic. Like I had never had halibut before.
But I'm sure whatever they did to it, it had a special.
Yeah, and I was a little bit scared. You know, I'm like seafood. I had not eaten a lot of different kinds of seafood before. And the main course was a little bit of a guinea hen, like a small chicken, basically, with, oh, you know what? I think the mushrooms were on the main course, the little chanterelle mushrooms.
Okay, we can move those over there.
Love
Yeah. And then, but the dessert was chocolate souffle.
Right.
And I'd never had souffle before. And
as chocolate souffle, if done right, is the most heavenly thing ever.
It was amazing. And so when the server brought it, at this point, they had noticed that we were maybe out of place as these like young kids in this fancy restaurant. So she said, have you ever had souffle before? And I said, no. And she said, would you like me to teach you how to eat it? And I said, yeah. She said, oh, you poke a hole in it with your spoon and you pour the sauce in. So every bite has raspberry sauce. So I did that and I took a bite and she said, how is it? And I was like, well, it's good, but it would be even better if you brought me a glass of cold milk.
And I would think a really snobby restaurant goer would go, oh, never. But I bet a great chef would go, wow, that is a compliment. They want cold milk with my souffle.
Yeah, so
I would think so.
Yeah,
I would think that. You know,
it was amazing. Yeah,
I think when it comes to food, other than the traditional things we eat every day, we're so scared of it. We think that maybe it's beyond our grasp, or it's something we're never going to understand. So why try it?
Yeah.
But you gotta. You learn so much about the world, as we learn from your show, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. You learn about culture. You learn about why they eat it that way. There's history lessons in every bite you take.
Totally.
And the way you host this show and you walk us through it is fascinating, because you seem just as curious as we should be.
I mean, I think there's something to learn from everyone. And to me, it's funny because I have a friend who says, oh, you could have been a vacuum cleaner salesperson and you still would have found a way to connect people.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a thing where like I just happened to sort of stumble into this career that is the easiest possible way to bring people together, because as humans, we all eat and there's always a story and there's always pleasure. And we actually all crave salt and fat and acid. And so it just is the most natural way to sort of learn something about somebody else.
Well, I want to get into salt, fat, acid, and then heat in just a second, because they are 4 elements, which of course Samin tells us and shows us on the show that without them, it's not going to be the same. Anyway, how did you get started? What was your first job? And what was it like? Was it a struggle, or was it just like, poof, fabulous?
Well, after I had that dinner, I wrote a letter to the restaurant asking for a job as a busser, bussing tables.
Right.
I was a college student, and I always had jobs, like work study. So I was like, well, instead of working in an office, I'll do this. So they hired me on the spot, which I think meant that they were desperate for a busser.
No, they love you. Translation, they love you.
And they were so, it's just, this restaurant is a temple to the senses. There's just, beautiful flower arrangements everywhere. It smells gorgeous. The walls are actually lined with copper. So the light is so warm and it feels amazing. And I was so young and impressionable. To me, these were rock stars and I wanted to learn to cook like them. So within 3 weeks, I was begging them to teach me how to cook. And I was, I worked as an unpaid apprentice for like about 2 years. And then, they taught me everything. And the menu, like I said, it changes every night and it's fixed. So I would come into the menu meetings with the chefs and they'd say, oh, tonight we're going to make this, this, and this. And some nights it was Italian food. Some nights it was French food. Sometimes it was Moroccan food.
So you traveled around the world every night.
Exactly.
Without whipping out a passport.
And I had never, I didn't know the difference between parsley and cilantro. Or they would send me to the spice shelf and say, like, bring the cumin. And I'd come with the wrong thing because I didn't know anything at this point. So I didn't understand how these guys knew everything. And I started to pay attention and realize, because they never used recipes. That was the other thing.
Right.
The only way that I knew how to cook was to open a book and be like, okay, 2 cups of this, 45 minutes, set the temperature to this.
They just know.
And they knew everything. And I was like, how do they know how to make everything in the whole wide world? It was crazy. So I started to see, after a year and a half, that there was this pattern that no matter what we cooked, they always were paying attention to these 4 elements.
And they are?
Salt, fat, acid, and heat.
Let's talk about them.
Sure. So salt is, of course it comes in one form of salt crystals, but it also is part of all of these other ingredients like soy sauce and cheese and pickles and anything really that tastes salty has salt in it. So
Right.
it's a source of salt in our cooking.
And so, a lot of people when they're cooking, they forget there's salt in these ingredients
Yeah,
already.
yeah.
And they're like, well, should I put salt on it? Well, no,
Yeah.
you need to taste it. It probably already has salt in it.
Tasting is so important. And what salt does is it enhances flavor and it makes things taste more like themselves. Like if you think of tomatoes, for example, you have a tomato, it's kind of water, you put salt on it, and then it bursts in your mouth, the tomato
It
flavor.
tastes more like a tomato.
Yeah.
And the same with desserts. If you don't put a little salt in your sweet dessert, you can't really
It's
taste.
flat.
Right.
Yeah. So that
wow.
salt's pretty much the most important one. And then fat is also, I say salt's the most important one. Then I'm like, fat's the most important one. They're all the most important ones.
It's true. And I'm going to stop you for a second. When you watch the fat episode,
Yeah.
she's in Italy, okay? And they pick up a pig and they do their pig thing. And they actually saw the pig in half. And you see where your prosciutto comes
Yeah,
from.
I'm told
Oh,
I'm
dear
not going to
God.
want supersod anymore after this episode.
Oh, that's for the meats of the head, the fats of the head.
Oh, no.
Okay, but the importance of fats in everything we do in cooking. Talk about that.
Fat. So where salt enhances flavor, fat carries flavor and it translates flavors from places. So a way I like to explain it is if you think of garlic, if you sliced up a garlic clove and you put some in a little pan of water and some in a little pan of oil and sort of sizzled them both for a second and then threw away the garlic, if you taste that water, it just kind of tastes like faintly garlicky water. But if you taste that oil, it'll be perfumed with the whole aroma of that garlic clove.
Why is that?
Because the oil or fat of any kind is like a sponge for all those aromatic molecules, and then it transmits it and makes the whole dish flavored. That's why you kind of sizzle garlic or onions at the beginning of your sauce so that it gets into the whole thing.
Okay, so different fats. We find fats, of course, in oils and in butters, but we find fats in all sorts of things. And you forget about it.
Again, cheese, yogurt, anything that tastes creamy is a great source of fat. And one of the lessons that I love to sort of say if people are like, this is sounding like a lot of information, I'm like, well, you already know all of this because anytime you go to get a burrito,
Right.
and you're like, okay, well, that burrito's kind of dry or it doesn't taste that good. Immediately, you're like, I want to put sour cream and guacamole
Cheese.
and salsa and cheese on top.
Right.
And that makes it taste so much better. And what are those things? Cheese, it's salt and fat and acid. Sour cream, it's fat and acid. Guacamole, salt and fat and acid. And that's what makes things taste good. So this idea is just to give you a vocabulary for what you already know in your mouth.
Okay, move to acid.
Yes.
'Cause
Yeah.
Acid is the confusing one for so many people.
Yeah.
But they don't realize they're putting acid in their dishes more than they even realize it.
Totally. So anything fermented, which a lot of things that we eat every day, we don't even know they're fermented, is a source of acid. So coffee is a source of acid. Chocolate is a source of acid. Tea is a source of acid. And then, of course, pickles and cheeses and yogurts. And then even the most obvious things like squeezing lemon on top of something or vinegar or wine. Those are all acidic. And what acid does is it contrasts, it brings balance to something. So sometimes you might have enough salt, like I was making chicken pot pie with a friend and she
Right.
was like, this has enough salt, but something's not right. And I said, oh, it's because it feels flat. It's too rich. You need to put in a little, a spoonful of white wine. So she did that and all of a sudden it came to life.
Acid.
Yeah.
So you put them together. You
Wow.
have salt, fat, acid. They're doing these little numbers, these little dance routines that they do so well. But then you apply heat. And heat, it just adds that final thing. That's
Totally.
that final stage that makes it happen, right?
Totally. And for me, heat was kind of the most intimidating one because in a restaurant, you watch people at home, you're watching over one pan on a burner, but at the restaurant amounts, they need to cook 8 pans of something at the same time. And I was like, how are they controlling this without burning everything,
I always wonder that.
Yeah. And so one time we had run out of stove space, and so I needed to make tomato soup, and they said build a fire in the fireplace and start cooking over the fire. And I was like, that is insane. Why would I do such a thing? How do you control a fire? And I realized over time I was like, oh, it's not that I'm paying attention to what's happening under the pot. The source of heat doesn't matter. You want to pay attention to what's happening in the pot. So is it sizzling at the right rate? Is it browning at the right rate? Is it going too fast and burning? And, over a fire, that just means like move away some coals or move the pot to a cooler spot. Move your steak to a hotter or a cooler spot.
Control your heat.
Yeah, control your heat.
I love it. I love it. Now, look.
She makes everything sound so interesting.
It is. Well,
Thank you.
It's all going to come together in a second. Hold on. A text just came in. Who is this salt, fat, acid woman? She's amazing. I want to be her friend. Seriously. I want to be her friend, which is why we fell in love with the show.
Thank you.
Samin Nosrat. And how do you say your name?
Nosrat. Yeah.
Nosrat. Okay. The host, of course, of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, and the book. Of course, I ordered it. It was there like an hour later. You have to get it. Samin's laugh and pure love for cooking fills me with such joy. She's a delight, says this texter. Aaron,
thank you.
hold on, let me get Aaron here. Aaron, say good morning to Samin Nosrat.
Good morning, Samin.
Hi, Aaron.
First of all, I literally binge-watched your entire series the first day it came out.
But to be fair, it's only 4 episodes.
Exactly. It's only 4 episodes.
I mean, it's not like it's a series of 12, which it should be.
That is true.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted. All right, go ahead.
You're fine. I do have one question, though. What is your favorite meal to make?
Yeah, what's your favorite?
Well, to me, like the thing that brings me the most pleasure is going to the farmer's market and finding all the vegetables. Like I have hungry eyes for vegetables.
Yes.
And also dessert. But so I love an excuse. I live by myself. So sometimes I buy too many vegetables and they sort of perish in the fridge. So I love an excuse to get to cook a bunch of different vegetables for people and like roast them and fry them and grill them and turn things into salads. That's definitely my favorite thing to do for people. But for myself, I would say my go-to thing that brings me so much joy is my friend just bequeathed me a rice cooker. So I make jasmine rice and then I cook tofu. Like she taught me her hippie tofu that she grew up eating in Hawaii. And I was always like, I never really liked tofu. And then she sort of douses it in Bragg's aminos or soy sauce and fries it in coconut oil. And the tofu gets this like lacy brown crust on the outside and the inside is like custard. And I eat that with broccoli. I probably make that for myself once or twice a week.
Lacy brown crust was my drag name. Yeah. All right, Aaron, thank you. All right, okay, let me give you an example of what I would do if someone said, okay, quickly, with vegetables, whip me up some salt, fat, acid, heat. I would take some carrots. I would turn the oven up really high. I would just toss them in some oil with my hand so I can feel it. I would have a little yogurt and a little lemon ready to go. And
where's your salt?
You forgot.
In the salt shaker. Okay. And you know what? But actually, to me, the acidity of the lemon kind of salts it as well. But I maybe put a little pistachio or two on it. Okay. But anyway, so then there's your vegetables. And the thing about this show is this. Not only do you learn about salts, fats, acids, heats, you learn about salt in Japan with soy sauces. Yeah. And you get to meet a Japanese family or two, and you learn about how they cook their meals. And you watch Samin eating them and enjoying them, and then she does her big smile and her laugh that she does. And then for fats, you go to Italy, the most beautiful people with that hot guy that does the focaccia. We love him.
How come you're not living with him?
It's really funny because after we filmed that day,
right,
somebody was like, I think he thought he was going to meet his wife today.
Oh, nice.
Why not? And for acid, you go to Mexico. Of course, gosh, not only do they cook with heat, but they also cook with acid there. They put fish and things, and
it's so beautiful.
And they don't really like to use vinegars. They use limes. They use lemon
and oranges. Those crazy sour oranges.
Right.
Yeah.
But you watch Samin interacting with the people from these countries. And you, by the way, how many languages do you speak?
3. 3, but they made it, generous editing made it look like 4.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Your Spanish was almost there.
Yeah.
But your Italian was great.
Yeah.
And then for heat, she takes you into her own home, and her mom and her best friend comes in, and she does that short rib, which is amazing. You've got to watch it. Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, of course, on Netflix. The book is available. You are just incredible.
Thank you.
I
You guys
just-
are so fun.
I
Thank you.
don't know if you heard us before you came in. I was afraid for
I
you to
heard.
come on.
I was the Barry Manilow.
You should never. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, let's eat cookies. All right. So
Okay.
have you had our friend Kathleen King has Tate's cookies?
I love Tate's
You
cookies.
have a bite of that.
Okay.
All right. And tell us what you're tasting in that buttery chocolate chip cookie. Even though I just kind of told you what you're tasting.
Brown sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely has some salt.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of chocolate. It's also like tastes like that butter got caramelized, you know?
Right.
That yummy caramely taste. These cookies are so good.
And I think it's the salt that makes them addictive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, this is my friend Christina Tosi
Mhm.
has Milk Bar.
I
This
love
is
a Milk Bar cookie.
Now, taste a little bite of that. Now,
Okay.
tell me what makes this one
Is she
so
supposed to cleanse her palate?
Yeah. Where's the sherbet?
Give her some sherbet. Yeah.
All right, what do you think of Christina Tosi's cookie? Isn't that just amazing? What are you tasting there?
You know what I love about these cookies? They're they're confetti cookies, and they taste kind of like cake batter.
Mm-hmm.
And
think-
these are really sweet. They
that-
definitely have some salt.
Is that Fruity Pebbles in there? Is that what she
Is
uses?
that what it is?
I don't know. It's like some kind of cereal.
I don't know what Fruity Pebbles taste
Christina
like.
Tosi, when she wants to
Oh.
get a new recipe, she'll go to the cereal aisle.
I love that. I love
She's
that.
great.
Wow.
No, this is so good. And these taste like cake batter or like birthday cake. I love that.
I love it. Don't you love food?
I love food. I love
Food's
people more
fabulous.
though.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Your love for food makes me love you.
We're never letting her
love
leave.
it.
All right, salt, fat, acid, heat. You have to binge it now, and you will not put it down. You'll watch the whole thing in one sitting. Samin Nosrat, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you
in.
so much, you
Fabulous.
guys.
Yay!